that sounds good.
Beauty.
Beautiful. So Simone, number one, what's your opinion about conditioning games with the full squad, and at what time of the season would you use it? So in my case, assistant coaches are constantly demanding to work on conditioning with games and or ball in hand, and my concern is always about having enough skills to get a good session in. It is easier on the aerobic side.
Okay, good question. I think the most important thing is you should manipulate. So first of all, coaches will want to have conditioning done with ball in hand because they get an opportunity to get some skill development and decision making, pressure, competition. So that's where they're coming from. As opposed to just conditioning blocks with no ball, no decision making, etc. So I tend to agree with them. I think if we can have a ball involved in conditioning more often than not, that's great. But like you've said, so long as it doesn't compromise the physical stress we want, the physical stress should be manipulated through changes in rules. Okay, so that's all you do is the conditioning game. You can get a whole lot of anaerobic work in, or you can get less anaerobic and more aerobic work in based on field size and number of players, and of course the rules that you implement. Something that I'll always do is if I'm running the conditioning games, is it gets a bit relaxed sometimes for me. And so I'll always put consequences in place, so drop balls, poor passes, poor skills, poor decision making, there'll be a consequence for the whole group. So just like in a game, in a competition game, you're not going to just throw a 50-50 because you don't want the team to be punished. So I think that's one way of keeping the skill level high or expectations high. So I think it's understanding what it is you want physically and then manipulating the rules in the game to get out of it what you want physically, and reinforcing the purpose of having a ball involved. Does that answer your question, Simone?
Yes. So I like you. I agree with the conditioning games. My concern was more like because I have a large group. So sometimes it's really hard to get even enough space. So like last year, it happened that I was training with reserves and Prem's player together, and I had all of them for 30 minutes at the end, almost at the end of the season. And then I was like, okay, let's do like a conditioning game because it's not worth it out. We had games like they were like it's win or lose, so you win or go home. And that's what we were doing like on a Thursday, just to have a bit of fun and release the pressure as well.
What sort of numbers?
More than 2 squats. So yes. I got 2 full squats plus
so
reserves.
50. So 50 odd.
Yeah, around 40, but yeah, 45.
40.
Yes, that's
So if I was in that situation, all I'd do is I'd split the field in 2, and I'd have one game playing on half the field, the other game playing on the other half of the field. So it's 10v10. And you can get a whole lot of awesome work and competition and rugby specific stuff in. Again, I'd pull in another coach to either referee or you just let an injured player referee. Yeah. Or something like that. So rather than try and have 20 versus 20, you gotta split the field up, split the teams up. I've run sessions in a situation like that where it's been 5v5, four games going on at a time, and you have them self-refereed or injured players or coaches refereeing. But otherwise, if it's 20v20, no one's touching the ball enough, so you might as well just run up and down the field.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you just got to be a bit creative with the spaces, and your numbers.
Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah. Because that's what I did at the end. I was like, I need help from someone. So I just got to ask an assistant coach. I did what you just said. Yeah. I split them, But yes, that's the only thing is like we obviously don't have much technology to monitor the effort. So your eyes and what you feel like is going to be that's your monitor, basically your assessment of how was the session, what you reckon how was the session. But yeah, so yeah, no, that's it. And the second part of the question was about what time of the year. So will you do just the conditioning games in season, or will you put some conditioning game in off season as well? Sorry, pre-season, not off season.
Yeah, I would be. A long time ago, we would in rugby union in New Zealand, at least, we wouldn't touch a ball until January. That was the sort of it was tough. It was just running and lifting, and it was crazy stuff. And it was almost you're just trying to break everyone. As I finished Super, which was 2008, we were using a ball from day one because the fittest teams weren't winning. It was the most skillful teams that were winning back then. And so the only way to develop skill is by having a ball in hand as often as possible. And so, yeah, I would be using conditioning games and balls and conditioning right from day one. And I mean, manipulating, field size, rules. So for example, you want to get props working hard. It's a waste of time having prop mark a winger, like in a conditioning game. So I'd always peer match them. So you've got to, you're only allowed to touch or compete with a player of a similar position. So it's prop v prop. So we call that man on D. So yeah, I think I would be doing conditioning games all the way through and manipulating things to achieve what you want. So if you're wanting a high anaerobic load, it's smaller fields, smaller teams, more touches on the ball. If you're wanting more of an aerobic game, then you just make the field bigger and more numbers. So you'd be 15v15 is a lot easier for a player than 5v5. Okay, no different to football actually. It's what they've done in football forever and a day. Is it's all about how many touches you get. I don't know if you guys have read about the Brazilian football team, but how many amazing players have come out of Brazil and they put it down to their small-sided soccer game they play, where I don't even know the number. I don't know if it's 5v5 or 3v3 or something crazy, so that you're getting so many more touches on the ball. It's all about repetition. It's all about under pressure and decision making, and the more often you can do that, the better athlete or player for that sport you'll be.
Yeah. Thank you.
They would train, can't remember the type of music, but they would train to music. So they would add like rhythm into their training as well. And I went and visited a friend of mine. He did a school exchange here in Canada. And then I went and stayed with his family for a couple months, and it was crazy, man. They had this soccer complex, and I went out to go play, and I was playing with kids that were probably, I don't know, they were maybe 10 years old, and I was probably 15 at the time, and I was like a pylon. It was unreal. They were incredible athletes. All right, Harry. Let's jump into your question about preseason. Harry had a really good question about preseason training. So basically what he wants to know is, what should your intensity be for preseason? What he remembers is preseason training was a lot like hell on earth. And I think something also, just to add a little bit to the question, what is, if you look on YouTube, if you watch a lot of sort of the professional teams and the docos that they put out, like they're doing like military style training, they're basically, what it looks like is like breaking their athletes. So I'd be curious, Gilly, to hear your thoughts on maybe the difference between how you would structure or attack preseason with amateur athletes, and then how you would go about it in the pros.
Okay, good question. I actually haven't been involved in a preseason for over a decade because the All Blacks don't get one. Well, that's not entirely true. I work with some of the All Blacks in the off season and the preseason, but remotely. Okay, so but preseasons now, whether it's rugby league, whether it's rugby union, football, I think the ideas are dependent on what I think the head coach thinks the team needs. So, do we need team building, go through some hard times together, bond? Like there's nothing better than having a real hard session and the team finish it. And just the adrenaline and the feel good factor of getting through it together is pretty huge. So I think that's part of why, you see all these docos and all this military style stuff that's been going on forever. You know, camps and sleep deprivation, I think even the New Zealand netball team went through a day or two of no sleep before the World Cup 2 years ago. Because the coach wanted them to go through some adversity together and to see who can withstand the pressure and all that sort of stuff. So almost like a selection test. So I think it's always different. So the first thing I'd do is look at the group, understand what the coach or the management group are thinking the group needs, and then you tailor it to what it is that you're trying to achieve over that period of time. Yes, they should be extremely tough. I think where people have got better, particularly what I see around New Zealand, is progressing load is something that in any other sport, an endurance sport, for example, you don't just throw a hard weekend at someone without progressing them to it. And I think that's where pre-seasons have got better. Like I know teams that will build over December to have a really hard 2 or 3 days before Christmas, knowing that they can build to that big 2 or 3 days, and then they've got maybe a lighter week over Christmas, New Year's to sort of absorb the load, recover before they go again. So I think the first thing is progress load and volume and intensity. Something that people again have got better at. I know in AFL. Pre-seasons used to be about if you could hit some certain numbers, then you didn't even have to take part in some of the sessions because you're already fit. And the sessions were tough for people that weren't fit. And so I think catering to individuals is probably really, really important. Rather than just thrashing everyone, it's about being more targeted and individualized. I don't know if that's answered your question, but yes, it should be tough, but it should have purpose. It should be about bringing a group of people together. Like I was talking to the Hurricanes yesterday, they've got 16 new players this year. So at a squad of 35 that assembled for pre-season, 16 of them haven't done a pre-season with them before. So if they go too crazy, they'll break them all because they wouldn't have experienced it. So there's a fine balance. But I think that in 3 or 4 weeks, you can get any group towards a really tough week. So be smart.
Well, thanks for
Hey,
that, Billy. That actually really answers my question. Yeah.
Was that okay, Harry? You got any further thoughts on that?
Just for that, because bringing it back to that team building, what I remember what we used to do every now and then, especially in our preseason, the SNCs used to take us through sort of like a group strongman training session.
Yep. So again, that's about competition, that's about teamwork, and we used to push trucks and we used to do all sorts of carry logs and you do all that stuff. I think the key thing has been physically ready to do it as well, though. So I would be putting that towards, the back end of a 4-week block or the back end of a 3-week block, so that we've got some strength behind us. Maybe we're not too fatigued, but it's just something that I learned the hard way is that it's cool having all these novel things in a preseason, but you often create issues. I took the Chiefs once. We went up to Tongariro. We did a 3-day camp, and we went to a national park. And part of one of the big days was tramping around the mountains, competing, like orienteering. So it was pretty much walking, but it was 7 or 8 hours on your feet. And so yes, fun, challenging. Putting people to the point of breaking. But we got Achilles issues. So we had 2 chronic Achilles issues come out of that day that we had to manage the whole season. So I think when we're thinking about how do we challenge and push and do all that stuff, you also don't want to create an issue that you have to manage and look after for the whole season. And that's why novel activities for me are a little bit risky. Okay. Doesn't mean don't do it, but just be smarter how you do it and who with.
Hey, Peter popped a really great question in the chat. If you want, Peter, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask it.
Jeez, I was hoping to get away with silence. The question was actually okay. The question was with preseason. Which would you build or focus more on? Would it be building a strength base or I guess a running base? Because particularly for amateur teams, because obviously for most amateur teams you probably get about 7 to 8 week block. And in that period of time, you've got to build the strength, the fitness, the ball skills, team play before you're actually into it. So I guess, how do you manage that, or how would you manage that? How would you manipulate it, and what would you focus on more?
So I think it's a good question. I think the again, just my personal opinion would be, if we're talking rugby union, we have become athletes that need to be good at everything physically. So we need aerobic fitness, we need anaerobic ability, we need speed acceleration, which you could say about any team sport. So let's be fair. But the difference is that you have very large athletes, and you need certain levels of strength across your group. So for example, your props and locks probably need to be stronger than faster. Okay, if we were to prioritize, you want to nail your core roll as a prop, you have to be strong through your hips to scrummage. That's your core roll. So being strong for a tight forward is more important than being fast. Okay, for a back, being fast is more important than being strong. And so I think it's a matter of prioritizing. But at the end of the day, every team sport athlete, other than maybe footballers, need to be strong, big, lean, fit, and fast. Okay, so I think if you've got a group of amateurs, I think you need to be doing everything all the time, but then prioritizing the 1 or 2 things that are most important for that player. So I would be treating them, if we're talking about amateur athletes, I'd be saying you all need to be fit. We all need you in the gym building lean muscle, and that's for injury prevention, but also performance. This particular group of athletes need to be stronger, so we might have an extra gym session for them, and less, and they might be out of the speed session. So I would sort of prioritize things based on specific needs of the positions within your group. But they all need ball in hand early. They all need to run. They all need to be strong. So what I'm saying is you do it all at the same time, which is how we train rugby players. It's trying to get a little bit of every stimulus into every session we can. The reason for that is it's about frequency of dose. So if we train something once a week, so let's say we squat once a week, we probably will not get stronger. Okay, if we've got a reasonable training background beneath us, we probably won't get stronger once a week. If we did squats a couple of times a week, or lower body patterns a couple of times a week, then we've got a bit more chance of making some progress. If we did lower body or squats 3 times a week, then chances are that frequency is going to allow us to make greater strides. Now, I'm generalizing here because really strong people need a week to recover if they've got 250 kilos on their back, right? But generally, if we're talking amateurs, you're needing more frequency to get a response. So Aerobic running, you need to do more than once a week. Anaerobic work, you need to do more than once a week. Speed, acceleration, more than once a week. Only way of achieving all that is by trying to do it all at the same time. And so if you've got a session with the club on a Tuesday night, well, okay, what do we do here? Do we do some strength work? Do we do some functional fitness? Do we do some aerobic work, some anaerobic work, some speed, some acceleration? Well, if you've got an hour, hour and a half, probably do all of it. And you plan it so that you sort of you explain, this is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get this group a bit stronger, this group a bit fitter, this group a bit faster. But generally speaking, we're trying to raise the bar across everything. So it's actually quite fun. It's a fun sport to try and program for, because it's quite complicated in that we're trying to create these athletes that can do everything. But you know, as long as you can justify what it is you're trying to achieve to the athlete and to the coaches, then it's probably the right thing. You know, if you've got a reason for it, then who's to say it's not the right thing? Because it is a bit of an art. But I think the key thing is understanding, particularly coaches, where they're at. If they see someone running up and down a line, you know, up and down the field, you know, with a stopwatch on, and it's just monotonous up and down the field stuff, and they're wanting to improve skill, well, you need to understand, well, actually, skill's really important. It might not be from your perspective as S&C, but from a rugby player's perspective, skill's huge. So let's work together to get skill and running. So I think that's sort of, yeah, I don't know if that helps, Pete, but, you know, pre-seasons, particularly for amateurs, is all about getting them ready to play a game. And often they don't have a lot of time, often they have a lot of energy. So if you've only got a few sessions, then you just got to make the most of them by trying to do everything. Good luck, mate.
Thank you.
Gilly, would you say, just to sort of piggyback on that as well, would you say in the amateur game, in Pete's case, and for a lot of us, would you be asking the athletes what they had been doing prior to coming in? Because I think what can tend to happen is, say you get a bunch of guys who maybe the only time they run is when they're in at the club. And then you have this session planned where you've got some speed, aerobic, anaerobic work. And then maybe it's like 5 minutes in, 10 minutes in, they're dropping like flies. Would you be asking them beforehand what they've been doing?
100%. I think that thought came through my head. I just forgot to mention it, Bucky. The key thing with like even in Super Rugby, the players have sort of you know, a month or so where they're on leave in the wilderness, right? And we used to have to ensure that they were doing some things in the month before coming in, otherwise they couldn't handle session one. Okay, so I think it's really important that there's an understanding of where they've come from and what they've been doing, so rather than just assuming they're okay and they're all of a similar level. If you assume that, you're going to end up people coming in and after 1 or 2 sessions in a week falling over. So I think that's also why you progress slowly. So rather than trying to prove yourself week 1 of how tough you are and how hard you can work them, you're better off progressing them to, you know, week 3 or 4 being tough. And I think that, you know, nowadays, S&Cs, sports scientists, performance coaches, whatever we want to label ourselves, we're actually smarter. We're smarter than we used to be. And so, you know, it's not about how tough and angry you can get as an S&C coach, which is what it used to be. It used to be about rah, rah, rah. It's more about, you know, how can you build someone towards a point they've never been to before. So I understand where they've come from is important, Bucky. Good point.
And when you think about understanding like where they've been and where they've never been before, would you use, this is another one from Peter, would you use any fitness tests outside of the Bronco, or do you prefer just to stick to that because it's so standardized and you would typically have lots of data from an athlete for years previous?
So We started using the Bronco. I can't remember when we started it. I want to say 2010 or something. And originally it was just a running block. It was just a running block. And then when we started understanding that, it's short, everyone can do it, we understand what a good number is, it sort of took over the yo-yo for us. Now everyone does it all around the bloody world. It's crazy. But I think it's like, we don't use just the Bronco. Like, that's what amuses me a lot with how often it's used across the world. But like, I love 150s, for backs. Speed endurance for backs is massively important. And so 150s on a minute turnaround, blocks of 9 is awesome. 9 minutes of work. And you can straight away see two things. You can see two things in a 150, speed and then fatigability, so anaerobic endurance. So, like Damien McKenzie for the All Blacks, he's tiny. He's like 83 kilos or something. But he does like 21 seconds, 22 seconds for 150 meters repetitively. So it doesn't slow down. Okay. Someone like a Mark Talia, a little bit bigger, maybe 90 kilos. He would be able to start off at 22, 23 seconds, but he ended up at 26, 27. And so you can see the difference straight away just through two athletes, slightly different athletes, but both of them as quick as each other over one rep, but one gets tired and fatigues and the other one doesn't. And so that, to me, is how we should be assessing athletes, is what's the most important thing for them. The Bronco is nice for a squad, for a team, for a check-in. So no issues with that. And we use it often. But there's other important blocks of running that we can do, just like in the gym. There's certain lifts that are important and certain ones that we still look at but don't really put a lot of emphasis on. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I would be looking at other things to make comparisons to assess training benefit. So those 150s, it's just a training block. It's not a test. It's just a training block. But by doing it, we go, oh, okay, you're fatiguing a bit quicker than a couple of other lads. We might need to have a look at how that's affecting you in the game. Oh, no shit. In a game, you're chasing a kick, but then you're turning around and walking. Okay, so not only are your 150s not as good as they could be, but look, on the field, you're chasing a kick well, but then you're turning and you're gassed and you can't get back to support the counterattack. So have a look at, how those things might work. You can do the same for bouncing 88s. So, 22 bouncing shuttles. With big boys, you're assessing acceleration, deceleration, and getting to your feet quickly. And so you line up 8 guys, eight big boys, type 5, and you get them to do 88s, bouncing 88s, and you see who's dragging the chain and who's not. And so all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, he's going good. He's going good. Those two are a pack of shit. Okay, so maybe they do another block. So there's and that's the joy of, if you have some drills or some running blocks that are your go-tos, which is sort of what I've got ones that I know are really good, really familiar with everyone. It's just a training block, and then during that training block, whoa, okay, all of a sudden people stand out, for good and for bad, and you can do them all season. Okay, before every Thursday training in the All Blacks, I do I do 4 10-meter accelerations from the ground, so the whole squad. And it's beautiful because they all compete, they're all running hard, and you can see who's struggling to get off the ground and who's struggling to move quickly over 10 meters. And so you just bank that, and then you know that the following week, okay, he was a bit slow there compared to the rest of the group. Was he just not warm enough? Is he struggling a bit? Does he need to do more of it? So again, it's a familiar task. You can actually be putting it part of your program. It's just bread and butter. Okay, it's just a cool part of the program.
Would you, if you were gonna use the 150s for a test, because I know I'm sure we're all curious, would there be like a certain number of reps you would use? Like, would you say like let's try and accumulate like 1,500 meters? Would you go for 10? Would you go for 5 with a break and a repeat? What would you use?
So again, it's not a test. Okay, so it's just a monitor. It's just a running drill. It's just because you get a number. It's like benching. Okay, we know if we bench on a Monday, and on one Monday we're doing 130 for 2, and the following Monday we do 132.5 for 2. It's not a test. It's just a monitor. We know we're getting stronger. Great. So the 150s are the same. So in our bye weeks, we do 150s all the time. For some of the players, remember, this isn't just for everyone. This is for our backs. And first bye week we might do 3. Okay, and the next bye week we might do 3 150s, 3 minutes rest, 3 150s. Why? Because we want to progress volume and we want to maintain quality. And then towards the back end of the season, we might be up to 9 150s, either in a row or in blocks of 3. So as long as whatever you do is repeated, then you can track progress. So the key there is repetition. So it's not a test, it's part of your training. 88s are the same. If you're doing bouncing 88s every single week or every couple of weeks, then it's just part of your training. And hey, by the way, if you did 4 bouncing 88s with the whole squad in an amateur team, then every Tuesday you're going to see who's towing the chain and who's not. And everyone knows what it is. It's familiar. You do it every single week, and all of a sudden you've got guys that over a season who were last are now coming mid-pack. Great, they got fitter. So I think it's about repeating something that you're going to be able to use all the time to just see how you're going or how individuals are going, just like in the gym.
Go for it, Andy.
Yeah, so Gilly, I heard you call on those 4x10 meter accelerations. I'm just wondering, mate, like,
Did you see that? You actually saw that, didn't you, mate? And
I did, mate. I did indeed.
Yeah,
I was
mate.
lucky to, but so when you see that and you put those players, I'm presuming you put those players in groups, right? And then do you have a conversation with them afterwards? You know, whether it be one of your props or hookers or whatever, and you say, mate, what's going on? You know, you're a bit slow on that, and kind of try and filter in a bit of detail behind why they're not moving that fast.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it with the starting 23 on the Thursday. Okay. And this is why our roles are so fascinating, is that there's a massive amount of psychological nuances within our roles. You know, like if I went up to our starting prop on a Thursday and said, mate, you look like a sack of shit. How's he going to be going into the game thinking, oh shit, Gilly said I look like a bag of crap. Shit, I wonder if I do. Oh, I'm probably not gonna play very well. I wonder what's going on. Like, you sort of don't go there. But I would bank it and have that conversation probably after the game's been and gone, and we're starting the next week. If it was someone not playing, then I'd probably go up to them after that training session and say, mate, are you all right? Like, you look like you were towing the chain a bit in the warm up. And then you find out, oh, actually, and I did that in where were we? Well, a few weeks ago, I went up to a player after the training on a Thursday and said, mate, what's going on? You haven't run fast today. And he hadn't told anyone, but he had a really bad ankle. Okay. And so again, you know, we need to coach with our eyes. So we watch. We don't need a number as such, but we watch and go, oh, okay, he hasn't run fast. Wonder what's going on. Check in, have the conversation. Oh, wow, he needs an injection. Okay, so that's where that got to. And I think in any level that you work with, you have a conversation. I used to go on hot and say, you need to run fast. Okay, stop being a lazy prick. Whereas now I'll be more like, hey, mate, are you okay? Like, you haven't really opened up. Are you a bit tight somewhere, or are you okay? And if they say, yeah, no, I'm fine, it's like, okay, cool. Well, it'd be really good for you to run fast before we jump on the bus. and then it's like, oh yeah, no, okay, that's a good idea. So I think it's a little bit of use what you see to either ask questions or to individualize some added work. And time your conversation. That's probably the big one. Time your conversation. Doesn't matter who you're working with. Time your conversation. Could be with the coach. Like timing is everything. And it's often the thing we get wrong.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And that's good feedback. Is that sort of 4x10 acceleration though, like a really good measure to kind of get that connection about, okay, is this player switched on? Are they feeling, I'm trying to look for little cues that you can read at training that the player's a little bit off, because you don't see them all the time, right? When you're a coach, as opposed to S&C, you don't see them all the time. You get little snippets. Is this a good one to sort of gauge where they're at?
I think it depends on when you do it, mate. I think it depends on what it is you're trying to look at. I think from this conversation so far today, like what I feel like I'm trying to get across is we want to identify what our group needs, and then we want to identify something that we can put into our group's plan that we can constantly check in on to see how we're going. And so that could be 10s. It might not be. It could be bouncing 88s. Could be 50s. Okay. It could be something else that you dream up. It could be what's a drill I've been using lately? A 60 38. Okay, is what I've been using with the outside backs lately, which is run hard 60 meters out to the 10 meter line, turn and burn back to the 22. So again, we chase because the kicking game in international rugby has become so important that it's one, you got to put kick pressure on, so you got to chase a kick. Then if they receive the kick and they kick it back, which we call aerial ping pong, you've got to turn to get back for the counter. And so we've designed it. It's not designed. It's pretty simple. But 60, 38. So it's replicating what that player or that group of players might need to be able to be good at. And so for an outside back, I'd be saying, okay, you're going to do 60, 38s, and you're going to do them on a minute. Okay. And we want you back to that 22 meter line as fast as you can to support in a counter attack. So for your outside backs, it might be a 60, 28. For your type 5, it might be bouncing 88s. For everyone else, it might be 100s. Okay. So, and if you do it regularly, then it becomes just a visual, okay, someone's a bit slow, someone's going really well. But you see there's purpose, there's specificity to it. But the key thing being it's regular, so you can get a checkpoint visually. It doesn't need to be a number.
Hey, Gilly. Moving towards the gym stuff. Thoughts on squat variations like safety bar, box squat, front squat, or do you usually try to stick to? Because I know you're big on squats. Do you like to just stick to the back squat?
I think
Yeah,
I think in season I wouldn't. I mean, our season's not that long, right? So our season's sort of, I don't know, 5 months, okay, from start to finish. If I was with a group for 8 or 9 months, okay, or 12 months, then I'd be varying your squat pattern, 100%. So I think it's dependent on, the level of strength that you have, the proficiency of movement, and then what's going to be best for them. So there's some people that can't squat very well, or they have back history, and so they trap bar deadlift. Okay, so I always just call it you've got your primary bilateral lift. Okay, so what's your go-to lift that you can do well and safely, and that we're going to use to check how strong you are. Okay, so that's your primary lift, and then around that, manipulate or build in variations to that primary lift. So front squat, safety bar squat, box squat as an example for a variation for a squatter. For a deadlifter, a trap bar deadlifter, elevated trap bar deadlift, deep trap bar deadlift, variations of barbell deadlift. And so we've got similar pattern, but variations to it. And I think the key being what it is we're trying to improve. So for example, scrummage and props, their primary lift is a squat, but then what we manipulate, we don't manipulate what sort of squat they do, we manipulate the tempo. Okay, so we would basically control the eccentric phase, let's say 3 second down, and then we'd pause at the bottom. And then the focus being on what weight can we move from stationary to the top in the concentric phase. And so again, we're trying to replicate what they might experience in a scrum session. But we manipulate the tempo or the loading parameters as opposed to changing the exercise. So again, we've got so many variations to everything we do. Understanding what it is we're trying to achieve. I talked about squatting more than once a week. So back squat, let's say back squat Monday, posterior chain Tuesday, so hemi glute, and then maybe a heavy quarter squat from a rack with chains on a Thursday. So we're still hitting that squat pattern, but the loading parameters are different. Different range, different speed, different load, and different purpose. So I think that's probably, I don't know if that answers it, Dan, but variations is fine, but have rationale for it. Okay, have reason for it, rather than just it's pretty hard to get good at something and improve something if you keep changing it, which is what I said about the running blocks. If they're familiar, you know how hard to go, you know what it's about. It's not familiar, it's not foreign. Squatting, you want to improve squat, you got to squat, and if we keep changing it every 2 or 3 weeks to a variation, then every 2 or 3 weeks you're trying to figure out the loading, where you're at, the depth, you're constantly trying to figure it out. But if it's something that's just a staple bread and butter part of your program, then you've got more likelihood of getting very, very good at it.
Yeah, and so when you say, because I know each Kiwi player had their own bilateral lift, whether it was squat, deadlift, or Bulgarian. Was the Bulgarian the third one?
Yep.
Yeah. What's your line of thinking in terms of, do you just go squat first, or if they can't squat as well, go deadlift? They can't deadlift as well, then just go Bulgarian?
No, so the only reason I vary from squat is if they've got a physical issue. Okay, yeah. So the people doing Bulgarians, generally in my program, have back history. So give a good example. Sam Kane had back surgery in June, so he's doing Bulgarian split squat for the rest of his life. Okay. Geordie Barrett gets patella tendon issues from being a jumping running athlete if he squats, but doing a split squat or Bulgarian split squat, it removes all his patella tendon issues. And so the variation to squat is only for a physical issue or reason. Trap bar deadlifting isn't because you can't squat, it's because, again, you've probably got a back issue, but you need bilateral strength because you don't like single leg stuff. Okay, so I think it's understanding why you would do what. Not being able to squat well isn't a reason to change what you do, because hips getting low and knees over toes, so basically a proficient squat pattern, is really important for everything we do, whether that's jumping, pushing, or running. And so by just dumbing it down to something that anatomically is better for you, we're not addressing the issue. Okay, so I think that get good at squatting, but if it's bad for your back or your knees, then figure out something that's similar that you can do well.
Cheers, Gilly.
Good, mate.
Gilly, it probably doesn't happen, I guess, too much at a pro level because you guys are so organised and know how you work. But I guess, have you ever had the points where a coach has said, I need this done, and you're like, no, we need to get this conditioning block done. Probably happens more than I'm giving you credit for. But I guess, how do you go about navigating that? Because at an amateur level, particularly, that happens so much. So I guess, how do you go about navigating that at the pro level, and how would you recommend doing that at the amateur level, I guess, as well?
I think what you're saying, Pete, is if there's a little bit of a disagreement between S&C and coach, is that what you mean?
That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So I learned the hard way, I think, is not the hard way of we keep learning all the time, but I think what we always have to do is put ourselves in the other person's shoes, first and foremost. So if a coach is saying this is what they want, then that's because they're feeling, based on what they're seeing and what they're wanting to achieve, that this is what's most important. Okay. So that's the first thing. Before we go at it, just try and listen. So listen first, understand where they're coming from, and then go, okay, do I agree or disagree? If I agree, great. If I disagree, how am I going to approach this? So take a breath, then go, okay, I hear what you're saying, but can we achieve the same thing by doing this? Okay, so rather than a no, which is what I've done before, it's now it's more of a, can we get a compromise where actually it could be better? So give you an example, coach wants a passing drill done because they need skill work. You want to do a running block because they need to get fit. Well, let's come up with a running block that has a skill element to it. How easy is that? For example, the coach says, I want to do a passing drill because our passing 5 to 6 meters apart is poor, both sides. And you're saying, yeah, but I want them doing 50s. Or how about we do this? How about we do 50s where you have the ball in hand, you accelerate hard, you pass, and you do it in groups of 5 or 6 or 7 across the width of the field. And so we're getting our running hit in, we're getting our passing in. It's a compromise. It's actually a better outcome for both of you. So I think don't roll over, because rolling over, you'll just keep getting rolled over. Don't fire up, because coaches will just dig their heels in and tell you to know your place. Okay. But if you do come up with an alternative that actually means you've listened to them and you're just trying to come up with what's best for the team, then you'll gain so much respect. And all of a sudden, the coach will be coming to you with ideas. Okay, how can we do this? Have a think about it. We'll chat tomorrow when we get to the field. That's the position you want to get to. So it's no different to when you're working with the athlete. Collaborate with the coaches. Okay, if you collaborate, they'll respect you and value your opinion way more than if you just operate in your own little silo. They're here, you're here, and it's like, oh, you've got 10 minutes. Go and do your thing. It's like, well, maybe if we did 20 minutes together, we'll get a better outcome. Okay, so I got to the point, I got a new coaching group I'm working with this year, and I got to the point where I wasn't even doing a warm-up because our team didn't understand how we were trying to play. So I said to the coaches, rather than have the team out here for 3 hours, let's make the warm-up us going through how we're going to play. Walking and jogging. And I'll just come in over top every 2 or 3 minutes, and I'll get them to do some jump land, some hopping, some skipping, some mobility, some prep as part of our learning the game. Okay, so that was me collaborating with the coaches. The coaches, these guys are coached for a long, long time. They thought it was an absolute genius idea, and it's not. It's like it's not rocket science. And they were like, "Man, we've never done that before." But all of a sudden, rather than me going, "Oh, my warm-up's really precious," I'm like, "What's the best thing for the team? The best thing for the team is to learn how we're going to play. Let's not worry about warm-up with me. Let's do it as a combined thing." What did I have to give up? I had to give up some acceleration, some running drills. I didn't care because that wasn't important for the group at that point. Okay, so we need to park our egos a little bit and figure out what's best for the group. work with the rest of the staff or the rest of the coaching group, and players will love it because you've got a team approach versus a one-man band approach.
This one, I think this one's going to help all of us at various levels because, I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of us in this group are looking to develop as coaches and reach sort of higher teams or better opportunities along the line. So the question is, I've contacted the head coach of the first 15 at my local high school. He said they don't need help with the first 15, but they do for seconds and thirds, which he can help with. So this S&C Harry in this case could go in and help. And he's also overheard from a contact that the school's rugby teams are real low in morale. And this might seem arrogant or cocky coming from me, but we'll call it good old South African charm, because I know I'm still wet behind the ears as an S&C, but I can get them fit and stronger and fired up to beat the first 15 team, because that's what we all want, is to see the lower teams giving the top teams a challenge. My question would be, how can I prove that to the head coaches?
Okay. Who asked this question?
Harry.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, it's me, Bossman. Yeah.
So I think, Harry, I think it's important to let actions speak louder than words. Okay, that would be my sort of 5 cents. That if there's certain things that you think a group can achieve, then let the outcomes speak for themselves. So if you think the seconds can beat the first, then make it happen and just let people go, holy crap, they are humming. Wonder why that is. Oh, Harry's been doing some great work, you know. And I think that you prove yourself, you know, to whoever you need to prove yourself through outcomes. Those of us that talk too much just get people not arcing up, but people doubting or thinking that, you know, like we can all talk, but we can't all achieve outcomes. And so I think let the actions speak for themselves. And if you think you can get a group humming, then that will be amazing. And how good. And you don't even have to say anything. Like, wow, all they'll be going is, how come they are humming? Okay, they're really fit. They're fitter than the first. Okay, why are they fit? Oh, Harry's a genius. Okay, so that's sort of what you want to do. And I think that's I got a job. I got a job actually by that. I got a job through a team that I was involved with, performing really well in the finals, and the coach, the head coach, was actually in 2004. So the Chiefs got to the finals and they performed really well in the back end of the season. The observations from the All Black coach at the time was, the Chiefs has finished the best out of all the super teams. They looked the best conditioned and the freshest, if you can say that. And so he gave me a job, assistant S&C coach with the All Blacks, because of the performance of the team. So I think that's what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to achieve hey, the seconds are going real good. It must be because of how fit they are. Okay, so or how well they're managed and coached. Does that help, mate?
Yeah, no, true. It's just that, but the reason why I asked the question is because looking back home in South Africa and things like that, but hell, you can get it. Anyone can basically be a coach once they do their IRB level 1. But trying to get a job here as a S&C and part-time coaching, or just assisting with coaching every now and then, especially in Queenstown, it feels like the more you know people, the more the more you'll get the job and things like that. So that's why I asked the question, because I just want to show these guys basically that I can do the job for them.
Yeah, no, I hear you, mate. Like, there is very much an element of who you know in our field, but who you know, but also who's talking about you. You know, like, so I think it's opportunities pop up, and when they pop up, making the most of them and then all of a sudden, it's not about luck. It's about giving yourself more visibility. And I think that you're right. You just want a chance. And when you get the chance, just make the most of it. And then next minute, people will know about Harry in Queenstown, what he's done with the seconds. I think it's that's all you can control. All you can control is if you do get a chance, how you take it. But it's not easy, right? It's not easy. It's all everyone wants is a foot in the door. And you get a foot in the door, and then you just got to make sure you make the most of it.
Yeah.
Lucky, you got a question about
Thank you for
Nordic?
that.
Yes, sir.
So the question team was about whether we use Nordics or whether they are good exercise. I think what I mean, I'm sure we all know it, but eccentric hamstring work has been shown to be an important part of either injury prevention or strengthening hamstrings to rehabilitate quicker. So eccentric hamstring strength is massively important for running fast. So first and foremost, for performance. Hamstrings and glutes are obviously massively important for sprinting, and you only need to look at and talk to athletes about, the fastest people in the world. They have glutes and hamstrings that are incredibly strong and big, and very long Achilles tendons. And so, if we want to create fast athletes, we need big, strong glutes, strong hamstrings, and a stiff Achilles, because we can't make them longer. You're born with what you got, but we can make them stiffer. So from a performance perspective, eccentric hamstrings are important. When would you do them? All the time.
All the
Like
time.
every week. Every week you need to be getting an eccentric hamstring load in. Whether that's hinging from the knee, okay,
Yeah.
or hinging at the hip. I
Mhm.
think there's two approaches. So typically, I would be programming one of each week. So I'd be hinging at the hip on a Monday, and I'd be hinging at the knee on a Tuesday when there's a day off. So I think the key thing is to understand if they're unfamiliar, you get really, really sore. So people avoid them because they get sore, tight hamstrings. But that's the point. And once you get trained in them, you don't get sore, tight hamstrings anymore. You just get stronger at them. So, and I think, like anything, we introduce at a low volume and a low intensity, and we progress. So I would start with like 3 threes, at 70-80%, and progress to 3 4s, 3 6s, 3 5s for Nordics, something like that. But familiarity being important, and regularity or frequency being important. All the time. Not before a big running session or not before a big field session. After. There's some teams around the world that will do Nordics or eccentric hamstrings as a session in their own right after training on a Tuesday. Okay, so they'll go and do all the injury prevention stuff after their training on a Tuesday. So, a day and a half before they're on the field again.
Awesome. Team, we've hit the hour. Does anyone have a last minute question before we wrap it up? Oh, Pete's got a cute baby. That's exciting. Congrats, man. Sweet. Well, we covered a lot of ground. Thank you very much, Gilly, for sharing as much knowledge as you did today. Just to update everyone who's joining on the live and who's going to be watching the replay, we're in the middle of scheduling the next call for the month, and we're going to be combining a lecture and a Q&A because it's the Christmas season. So we're going to, later this month, we'll do a combined call, and then we're all going to knock off for the holidays. But in the meantime, I probably sound like a broken record, but I just want to reiterate so you don't feel shy. Drop your questions in the group, send them in via email, and remember that everyone in the group is also a coach and a resource to you. So if for some reason we don't get back to you in a day or so, network and chat amongst yourselves, and use the group to the best of your ability. And the replay for this call, I've learned how to chop these calls up. So bear with me, but in the new year, what we're going to have is a login for you guys. So you'll be able to log into our website, and there will be a whole bunch of small clips from these calls with titles. So you'll be able to look through every topic that we've covered and all the topics we'll cover in the future.
Nice work, Bucky.
We're leveling up.
Nice work, Bucky. Hey, just closing off, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed that. Awesome to see a few new faces and a few familiar faces. We're missing Mike, eh? Where's Mike? Mike's must be sleeping, eh? So yeah, welcome aboard. And as Bucky said, this is honestly, we've had some great discussions on WhatsApp in this group. So just throw stuff in there. Doesn't matter how trivial it is. Doesn't matter how big it is. Throw it in there and let's just bounce stuff around. We all need to keep learning. So ourselves included. So appreciate you all, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Couple of weeks probably. Bucky's got a cowgirl in the background. Is that a cowgirl?
That was Katie's dad.
Oh, they had a cowboy hat on. I thought you had a cowboy in the background. Good on you, mate. Nice team. Take care, eh? We'll talk to you all soon. Go well.
Thanks, Steve.